For more than 40 years, Vanna White has seemed to be the sweet, innocent, wholesome face of the family game show Wheel of Fortune. But behind the scenes, she has been hiding a dark sexual secret all these years. Before you say impossible, don't forget, steamy photos of her did also appear in Playboy Magazine, and she openly admitted that she and the Godfather of Sex, Hugh Hefner, were close friends.
Hugh Hefner decided to put me on the cover. He was a friend of mine.
And aside that, she also had one of the craziest same-sex escapades with one of the industry stars. We are going to share that story in this video, show you some of those Playboy photos, and tell you the real reason she posed for those. Before her fame, it turns out that White had a reputation for being bisexual and had at least one wild sexual encounter with another girl. But according to shocking revelations, White may have had regular flings with same-sex lovers. These jaw-dropping revelations come from a former Hollywood party girl, Liza Greer, who says she and White had an extraordinarily wild night of lovemaking. According to Greer, White was a regular face at Hefner's crazy parties. That's where Greer and White apparently first met, and they soon got to know each other really well. Like, really well. In one interview, Greer confessed that White was supposed to be pure, but she wasn't with me. That already sounds raunchy, but it gets better. White had a reputation for being bisexual according to her supposed lover. If you partied at Hef's, that's what you did. People liked that. Vanna was known for it, Greer exclusively told Radar Online. More than that, at the time, White was also in a very serious relationship, one that would end in utter tragedy. She was engaged to John Gibson, a model, dancer, and actor. Gibson was most famous for playing Jerry Cashman in The Young and the Restless, but he also had appearances in Three's Company, Eight is Enough, and Chips. Oh, and he also featured in the centerfold of the 1975 issue of Playgirl magazine, which is like Playboy, just with naked men instead of naked women. And also before finding his fame, he worked as a male exotic dancer. Gibson and White had already been living together, and he was apparently well aware of White's alleged sexual adventures. In fact, it was in that same apartment that she shared with her fiancé where White and Greer would have their fiery night of passion. As the story goes, according to Greer, White invited her over to their apartment while her fiancé was also there that night. But as soon as he stepped out of the apartment, things escalated quickly. John went to get something at the store, cigarettes or drinks, and we were in the bedroom, Greer explained. The attraction was already there. She was beautiful. One thing led to another, and she made a pass at me. Greer doesn't spill too many juicy beans, but it's pretty clear what happened in that bedroom that night. We were lesbian lovers and did what two people do in a bedroom. I had sex with her, obviously. It was pretty wild. When White's fiancé got back from the store, White apparently acted like nothing happened. But if Greer is to be believed, White regularly had same-sex love affairs. Speaking to Radar Online, she explained, "It was definitely something where she knew exactly what she was doing. I can tell when a girl is gay and just doing it for one time, but it was not just one time. It didn't feel like that to me." After their supposed crazy, wild night of sex, Greer says things got a bit awkward between her and White. Obviously, White's life in the spotlight was just kicking off, and she had a reputation to uphold. As the Wheel of Fortune host, she was this pure image of everything that is good and wholesome. Imagine what it would have meant for her career if people found out about her sexual adventures with other women, whether true or not. As Greer also explained, White was in the limelight and wanted to keep it under wraps. Keep in mind, all this was during the 80s, which was the wildest period in the history of Playboy Mansion parties. More shocking revelations from an A&E documentary revealed just some of the secrets that went on behind closed doors during that time, like for instance what Hefner himself liked to call pig nights. And yes, it's pretty much as disgusting as it sounds. But what is a pig night, I hear you ask? It was a ritual concocted by Hugh Hefner himself, in which he would bring carloads of prostitutes over to the mansion to entertain his VIP dinner guests, from Hefner's close friends to movie stars.
Every Thursday night, Hefner had two pimps bring up 5 or 6 girls each in their cars.
What makes the story all the more interesting is that Greer details much of her passionate night with White in her book, You'll Never Make Love in This Town Again. The book, which Greer co-wrote with 3 other women, tells the stories of 3 high-class prostitutes and their sexual adventures with Hollywood elites, from Jack Nicholson, Rod Stewart, Sylvester Stallone, and, yes, Vanna White herself. According to another source, Greer's impressive list of sexual conquests includes celebrities like actors Warren Beatty, James Caan, and Gary Busey. She also reportedly bedded musicians like Don Henley from the Eagles, Beatles guitarist George Harrison, and rock legend Billy Idol. The book is a self-proclaimed true story of sexual obsession and deviance. We are definitely not saying that Vanna White was one of the VIP guests at these pig nights, but it just gives you an idea of how insane things could get at the Playboy Mansion in those days. Now, you're probably burning to find out about those infamous Playboy photos. Well, this time, White was innocent. Or at least she wasn't totally guilty. She never meant for her semi-nude pictures to make it onto the cover of the magazine, and she was distraught when it did. When she first landed in Hollywood in the late 70s, she was broke as a doornail and couldn't even afford to pay rent. Too proud to ask her father for some money, she agreed to do a racy photo shoot for some extra cash. Even while doing it, she felt uncomfortable and unsure, but she did it anyway. So, just the fact that she did decide to do a racy photo shoot has to make you wonder, was she really that innocent? From the moment I said I would do them, I thought, I shouldn't be doing this, but I'm not going to ask my dad for money, so I'm just gonna do it. It wasn't until she landed her job on Wheel of Fortune that those photos would come back to bite her in the butt. The photos somehow found their way to Hugh Hefner, who was determined to publish them in his magazine. Vanna White had become an overnight sensation, a Hollywood superstar and a sex symbol, and everyone wanted a piece of her. So of course, semi-naked photos of her would sell like hotcakes, and Hefner knew it. White was devastated and feared that if the photos made it onto the cover of Playboy, it would mean the end of her career. So she begged Hefner not to publish it.
He was a friend of mine, and I went to him and said, Hef, if you put these pictures on the cover, it could ruin my career. And he still put them on there.
Hoping that she could persuade him to change his mind, White sued Hefner in federal court and also filed a staggering $5.2 million lawsuit against the magazine. Either way, in the end, the photos were published, and White only walked away with a bruised ego. Her career was thankfully not affected. Apart from this one wild story of Vanna White's crazy sexual adventures before she became famous, she has maintained a squeaky clean image ever since. Her relationship with her first fiancé, John Gibson, seemed nothing short of the perfect love story. Sadly, it was also one of the most tragic and painful times in her life. In 1986, he lost his life in a fatal plane crash. He was the pilot and the only one on board. The devastating loss nearly destroyed White.
My boyfriend at the time was killed in a plane crash. That was devastating.
There was also the wild but brief fling with Sylvester Stallone. The two were spotted together out and about in 1988, looking very much in love. Sly even took her as his +1 to a White House dinner. However, the short romance was over almost just as soon as it began. If Vanna White had any wild sexual encounters after that, she made perfectly sure to keep it out of the spotlight. 4 years after the tragic loss of her longtime lover and fiancé, White married film producer George Santopietro. But even this union would be shrouded in heartache and tragedy. Just 2 years after tying the knot, White shared the wonderful news with the world that she was expecting her first child. Wheel of Fortune also made a big deal of it, sharing the news on the show. In one of the episodes, they revealed it as an answer to one of the questions: Vanna's pregnant. But the joy and elation was not to last. White suffered a miscarriage soon after that episode was aired. However, in 1994, White welcomed her first child with Santopietro, a boy named Nico. Then in 1997, the couple welcomed their daughter, Gigi. Only a few years later, in 2002, White and her husband got divorced, and she would not be in a committed relationship again for another 10 long years. In 2012, she met and fell in love with a building contractor named John Donaldson. White and Donaldson have been together ever since. But even after all this time, she still doesn't have a ring on her finger. Speaking to People magazine, White set the record straight, saying, "I mean, we've been together 12 years and I feel like we are married. Do we have to get married? No, because we feel comfortable in our relationship." Looking at Vanna White today, do you believe she had such a crazy sex life? White has never admitted Liza Greer's story about their passionate night of wild romance. But then again, she's also not denied it. If you enjoyed this video, there's a good chance you'll also enjoy the one showing on your screen right now. Click, enjoy, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. See you on the next one.